All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here, talking about real music in real time for real people just like you and just like me. Don Felder. I am reading his book, Heaven and Hell, and haven't finished it yet, but I'm getting to some really good stuff. There's a portion in the book where Felder is talking about sort of the power structure within the Eagles and how Glenn Frey became a little bit more high-strung and had nicknames for people and was demeaning them and making them feel bad and so forth. And Felder attributes that to the relationship between Glenn Frey and Don Henley. Henley becomes the key focus in the band because he's writing great songs. He's a perfectionist. He and Irving, I think, are kind of a power couple, to use a phrase that I think Peter Cetera used with David Foster or vice versa. They became, of the same mindset in how they were going to protect the Eagles, how they were going to market the Eagles, how at times they needed to shelter the Eagles because the Eagles weren't getting along all that well. Things weren't going smoothly, but again, they didn't want everybody to know about it because they had recorded one of the greatest albums of all time, being Hotel California. But the power structure in the group changed for two reasons. Henley was hard to deal with, and I think Frey wanted this to be thought this was his band, and over the years later on, you would hear that it was Glenn's band. And I think Glenn reasserted a little bit of control during the comeback album that was recorded back in, 2007, Long Road Out of Eden. I think that is more of a Glenn Frey project, even though Henley, again, was strongly featured on the album. But Frey had a number of songs on that record. He wasn't just down to one track, which is interesting. To me, he was almost saying, hey, I'm going to reassert myself in this. If we're going to do this, I want to be a part of it. And I think Henley probably agreed at that point because some of their disagreements back in the old days revolved around the fact that Henley, I think, became the dominant player. And nowhere, like in the Eagles documentary, do you hear that. You hear it was all by design. Yes, of course, Don Henley sang more. And they tried to make Don Felder look bad in a way, but hey, we're not going to let Felder sing this when we have Don Henley here to sing it. And, was Victim of Love a throwaway track? No, it was a track that got on rock stations quite a bit. It was one of the harder rock songs that the Eagles ever performed, and it was basically all those guys in the studio live. I don't know how many takes, but it was done live, and then, Henley came in and sang the vocal over it. So the song has a great feel to it. You can feel these guys, and this is the reason, by the way, that music will never be as good as it once was if, they continue to, overdub everything and use computers to do everything. Because sometimes you just, ask Peter Frampton, okay? Sometimes a live recording just captures a kind of energy that you're not going to find anywhere else. And it's happened a number of times with live albums or live in the studio tracks. The Eagles, though, at that time, they were beginning to fall apart because these relationships were getting strained because Henley was in control. Frey didn't like it. So Frey took it out on other people, roadies and assistants and Don Felder. And think of it from Don Felder's point of view, right? He had this fairly good gig with Crosby and Nash, right? And then he's asked to join the Eagles. He signs a contract. And as Don Henley says, things change. I've done that video before. Things change. I don't know, Don, if they change once you sign a contract, but okay. Unless you renegotiate the contract, which I don't know if that was ever done, and I haven't read that yet. But the point is, Felder, I think, like so many musicians, believe that they were more than just a hired gun. They were in this to be a part of the band. Camaraderie, you get along, you play gigs together, you have fun, but it became increasingly political, both from a literal standpoint. Felder talks about these guys going off and doing all this political stuff, which it's not that he necessarily disagreed with it, he just didn't understand it. They were a rock band, and they weren't really singing overtly political songs. There may be little messages here and there that Henley wrote in to his songs to try to kind of, like an earworm, get inside and convince you that his way of thinking is superior or whatever, or just to make you think about an issue. But these guys, they weren't writing, like Pink Floyd records or anything like that. This was just a band, a country rock band that was writing primarily about relationships or trying to overcome adversity or doing the best that you can, or little, as Felder describes them, little snapshots or pictures that Don Henley would write and throw them out there like postcards. But I feel bad for Felder because he was the brunt of what happened, and he had an alpha male personality. So rather than just taking the beating, say like a Tim Schmidt or a Joe Walsh, he tried to stand up to these guys. And in the end, the very end, after they had gotten back together, after 7 or 8 years back together, they said, bye-bye, Don Felder. We don't want you having an equal share of our money. And it was, I think, settled out of court, if I remember. And they probably gave Felder a lot of money to go away. But I'm sure they made a lot more money after they said goodbye to Felder. And Felder's been trying, as hard as he can to kind of leverage that and have his solo career. He does perform Eagles songs, and nobody gives him a hard time about it. At times, I think it's a little excessive because I don't know if I want Don Felder singing Take It Easy, but, he does. And for good or worse, better or worse, it's what he does. But it's kind of tragic because obviously Glenn Frey isn't really here to defend himself anymore, right? His estate or his brother, people who know the situation, they would probably chime in on this and say, hey, that's not how it went down. But nobody's wrote a book to contradict what Felder has said. I think Felder does a great job in this book, really painting a picture of his life in this band and how sort of off the rails it went. And also there seems to be a little bit of regret sprinkled throughout this, as if, he's got a kid at the time and he can't do the things he wants to do with the kid. He's got a wife at the time and things start to go south with the wife, and, and he wasn't faithful to her and so forth. So things really aren't going all that well, even though these guys are super successful. And it kind of goes back to that idea that, you don't have to be famous to be happy. Fame can make you miserable. Fame can drive you insane. I mean, you look at what happened to Randy Meisner. He was not into fame. And now, it's just sad to see how over the years everybody has aged differently. If you look at the way Randy Meisner has aged compared to like Don Felder or Don Henley, there's a drastic difference there. Fame can destroy people. So I think this is a really great book to read, though, because you certainly get Don Felder's side of the story. And it would be fascinating if a rebuttal book was written either by Don Henley or someone else like Joe Walsh. I don't think Joe Walsh would ever write a book because he's really content. He doesn't want to, muddy the waters, or, this is why bite the hand that feeds you, right? And I think that's the way Joe Walsh and Tim Schmidt have lived with the Eagles over the years. And, Vince Gill probably experiencing the same thing. And Deacon Frey, obviously, he gets a pass because he is Glenn's son. I'm just hopeful that they're paying him well to do what he's doing, because he's doing a great job filling in for his late father. But in any event, I'm a big fan of the Eagles. I'm a big fan of Don Felder. I think the band isn't as good when, you know, he's not there, and they're not as good as they used to be. I watched Stuart Smith play these riffs, and, you know, he's on the notes and so forth, but he just doesn't have the speed, the energy. There's just something, you know, the charisma. There's something that's missing. It's, you know, I can go and listen to a cover band do Eagles tracks, and it's a lot like that. You know, the guy on guitar, he's covering the notes, he's hitting the note where it needs to be hit, and he goes to the next note, you know what's going to happen next, but there's no fire, there's no energy. It's very rote, it's very pedestrian, and with Don Felder, you get, you know, a flaming guitar player who is so underrated. I was talking to one of my friends who's a guitarist, and he says that guy is insane. People don't realize how good he is. He's not, say this about Don Felder, he's not underrated, but he could be rated even higher than he is. I think he's done himself a favor by separating himself and being a solo artist now, because he can really focus on showing off his guitar talents, whereas in the Eagles, it was a very controlled environment. You needed to sound just like the record. In this book, they talk about all the stuff that hit the cutting room floor, where they're all spontaneous and jamming and doing all these things, but that's not what Henley or the record producer wanted out of this group. They wanted, you know, make it very smooth and clean, and they did that. And they perform live like that. You'd love to see these guys go off on a 20-minute jam. Imagine, you know, I mean, they already jammed out Life's Been Good for a really long time, but they could go for 30 minutes. That might be excessive, but what I'm saying is there was room to stretch out in this band, and their goal was primarily to keep the songs just like the record, obviously. And it's a smart move. It's like an Irving Azoff move, because that's what your garden variety casual radio fan wants to hear. Well, I want to hear Hotel California the way it was recorded. I don't want them going off on a 20-minute guitar solo. That's ridiculous. These people would have been totally at odds going to see like the Outlaws or something like that. The whole side of their live album is one song. You know, that those days are gone. But those are some of the best days, if you ask me, because then you get to hear the band, all these different musicians just putting all their talent to work, and there's nothing better. It just, for me, because I like the ear candy. Give me more ear candy, not just, you know, vocals, but instruments, and, you know, do something a little different, because I've heard this take a billion times. I'd like to hear a new take on that honors the song, but maybe takes it to a whole new level. And that's, I think, what Felder wanted to do. I think he's capable of doing it. Same with Joe Walsh. You have those two guitar aces, and you're basically locking them up in a cage and saying, okay, you can go this far, but don't go any further. And for the Eagles, you know, it would have worked on a live album, more so than a studio recording, but they tried to make the live albums all sound like the studio albums, which it's uncanny if you go listen to the live albums. It's like listening to a studio album. So there you have it, folks. Extra long video here about Don Felder and his relationships in the band. And there's more to come on this as I will continue to read. But there's no question in my mind that Don Henley, his, I guess, ascension in the group made it difficult for everybody. Because a group, again, it's supposed to be kind of a democracy. And instead it ends up being a soft dictatorship with Henley at the top, Frey fighting for control, and the rest of the guys just saying, don't hit me, don't hurt me. That's pretty much what it's like. So anyway, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. And as always, I need your help over on Patreon for just $1 a month. We can continue the conversation about this video and other videos over on Patreon, where we can have a nice civil conversation. All right, I am done. See you soon.